I still remember that night as clearly as if it happened yesterday. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill the air. It fills your heart too. Rain was tapping gently against the windows, and I was sitting by the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had already gone cold. I didn't notice when it got cold, or maybe I did and didn't care. My mind was elsewhere on her. My daughter. My only child. The one who used to fill this house with laughter, songs, and questions about everything in the world. That night she was packing her things. Not for a trip, not for college, but to leave. To walk away. When I first heard her say, "I can't live here anymore, Mom," I thought she was joking. She said it so softly, so calmly, as if she were telling me what she wanted for dinner. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before: distance. A kind of quiet decision that had already been made. I wanted to ask her why. Why now? Why after everything we had been through together? But the words stayed locked in my throat. I had always been the kind of mother who believed in love more than control. I never wanted to hold her back. Never wanted her to feel trapped under my care. But that night I wondered if my love had been too quiet, too soft to hold her when the world outside seemed louder. She was moving from room to room, folding her clothes neatly, picking up her books, checking her phone every now and then. And I just sat there frozen. Every sound in the house felt sharper. The creak of the floor, the zipper of her bag, the soft sigh she gave when she saw me watching her. "Don't look at me like that, Mom," she said. Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't stop packing. I wanted to tell her I wasn't angry. I wasn't even trying to stop her. But how could I explain the kind of pain that doesn't show on your face? The kind that lives quietly behind your eyes? I nodded and said, "I'm not looking at you any special way, my dear. I'm just watching." That word, watching, it broke something inside me. Because that's what I'd been doing for months. Watching her slip away slowly. Watching her smile less. Watching her heart drift somewhere I couldn't reach anymore. It hadn't happened overnight. The distance began in small, invisible ways. First, she stopped sitting with me for tea in the evenings. Then she started taking longer to reply to my messages. And later she'd stay out late, come home tired, and head straight to her room. I told myself it was normal, that every daughter grows up and needs her own space. But what I didn't realize was that space can turn into a wall if no one speaks from either side. That night as she packed, I remembered her first day of school. She had been so scared to let go of my hand. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes and said, "Mom, will you wait for me outside?" And I promised her I would. I stood outside the gate the whole day just to keep my promise. Now, all these years later, she was letting go of my hand again, but this time she wasn't coming back. And again I promised myself I'd wait. The rain grew heavier outside. I could hear the wind pressing against the window panes. The clock ticked louder than usual. Everything in that moment felt like it was counting down to something I wasn't ready for. She came into the kitchen finally, her bag slung over her shoulder. Her eyes looked tired, not from lack of sleep but from something deeper. Maybe guilt. Maybe confusion. Maybe both. "I'll be fine, Mom," she said, forcing a smile. I nodded again. "I know you will." But inside I wanted to scream, "No, you won't. Not like this." I wanted to tell her that the world outside can be cruel, that no one will love her like I do. But the mother in me knew that sometimes, love means letting someone learn on their own. So I said nothing. She walked toward the door, and I followed a few steps behind. Her shoes made soft sounds on the floor, echoing through the house that suddenly felt too big for one person. When she reached the door, she stopped. For a second, I thought she might turn around, that maybe she'd change her mind, that maybe she'd remember the bedtime stories, the laughter, the way I used to brush her hair while she talked about her dreams. But she didn't. She just whispered, "I'll call you Mom," and stepped out into the rain. The sound of the door closing was soft, almost gentle, but to me it was louder than thunder. It was the sound of goodbye. I stood there for a long time. Maybe minutes. Maybe hours. I couldn't tell. I could still hear the rain, but inside me, everything went quiet. I went back to the kitchen table, sat down, and looked at her empty cup beside mine. We had shared tea almost every evening for years. That night, her cup stayed untouched. I picked it up, held it close for a moment, and then placed it back down, exactly where it was. I told myself I'd leave it there, just for one night. But days passed and I couldn't her leaving, but of her being here once. That night I didn't sleep. I walked around the house, touching little things she had left behind. A scarf on the couch, a book half open on her desk, a photo of us in the hallway. Each one felt like a heartbeat of the home we once shared. I whispered to the photo, "You'll come back someday." And for a moment I believed it. The next morning, I stood by the window and watched the street. The rain had stopped, and the world looked washed clean new. But inside, I still felt covered in the dust of last night. Neighbors went about their lives. Children rushing to school, people heading to work. And there I was, a mother trying to learn how to live without the sound of her daughter's footsteps. People say that when children grow up, they fly away like birds. But no one tells you that the silence they leave behind has wings too. And it flutters inside your chest every night. That morning I made 2 cups of tea again. One for me and one for her, just in case she walked back through the door. She didn't, of course. But somehow that second cup gave me comfort. Felt like hope. Days turned into weeks. Her room stayed neat, untouched. I couldn't bring myself to change anything. The pillow still held the faint scent of her shampoo. Sometimes I'd sit there, close my eyes and pretend she was just out for a little while. People told me I needed to move on. They said, "She'll come back when she's ready." But a mother's heart doesn't know how to wait calmly. It counts the seconds in silence. Each night I sat by the same window, watching the same street, thinking of the same face. And every time a car slowed down in front of the house, I hoped. Even when logic said she was gone for good, hope whispered, "Maybe today." I never told anyone this, but the night she left, she dropped something. A small silver bracelet. It wasn't expensive. Just a little trinket I had given her on her 16th birthday. It had her name engraved on it, Lila. I found it under the chair after she left. I picked it up, held it tight and whispered, "You'll need this when you come home." It became my secret promise. Every night, I'd keep it on the table beside my bed, as if it connected me to her. Maybe it sounds foolish, but sometimes love survives through little things. Not grand gestures, not words, just quiet waiting. As the days passed, I started remembering the good moments more vividly. Her laughter echoing down the hallway. The way she'd call out, "Mom, taste this," when she tried a new recipe. Her messy handwriting on sticky notes she'd leave for me. "Don't forget your medicine, Mom." Those memories became my companions. And though they brought tears, they also brought peace. Because somewhere deep down I knew love like ours doesn't disappear. It just changes its form. That's how I began to survive her absence. By remembering her presence. Sometimes I wonder when it all started, the slow drift between us. Maybe it wasn't one big moment. Maybe it was thousands of tiny ones that slipped quietly through the cracks of time. But before all that, there were the days when she was still my little girl. Days when she couldn't sleep unless I told her a story. Days when she believed I could fix anything in the world just with a hug. When Lila was born, she filled my life with a kind of light I'd never known before. The first time I held her, she was so small, her fingers barely wrapping around mine. She opened her eyes, those soft brown eyes that seemed to carry both curiosity and peace, and I knew I would never love anyone else quite like her. Back then, life was simple. Our home was small, but it was warm. The mornings began with her laughter echoing through the hallway, as she chased after the sunlight that spilled through the curtains. I'd be in the kitchen cooking porridge and she'd call out, "Mom, look! The light is dancing." She had that kind of heart, the kind that saw beauty in the smallest things. A butterfly on the window, raindrops sliding down the glass, the smell of bread baking in the oven. She taught me to see the world all over again through her eyes. Her father worked long hours back then, so it was mostly just the two of us at home. She used to say, "We're best friends, right, Mom?" And I'd smile and tell her, "Forever and ever." We had our little rituals. Every night before bed, we'd sit by the window with 2 mugs of warm milk. She'd tell me everything about her day, who said what in class, what she drew, what she dreamed about becoming. I laughed and said, "You don't have to own a bakery for that, sweetheart. Just bake one here." She puffed up her chest proudly and said, "Then I'll bake you a cake when I grow up." And she did. On my birthday when she was 12, she baked her first one. A little uneven, slightly burnt around the edges, but the sweetest thing I'd ever tasted. That was Lila. Full of love, full of effort, full of heart. Even when she made mistakes, she made them beautifully. When she was in high school, things started changing. Not bad changes, just the natural kind. She became quieter, more thoughtful. She spent more time in her room, listening to music, writing in her diary. Sometimes I'd knock on her door just to ask if she wanted tea, and she'd say, "In a minute, Mom," though the minute would often turn into an hour. I didn't mind. I told myself she was growing. That's what children do. They grow up, they grow apart, and then they grow into themselves. But there were moments when I'd look at her and see a shadow of worry on her face, something unspoken. She'd brush it off with a smile whenever I asked, but a mother can always tell when something's changing in her child's heart. There was one evening I'll never forget. We were sitting in the living room folding laundry together. I asked her how school was going. She hesitated before saying, "It's fine." I pressed a little more. "Just fine." She shrugged and said, "People change, Mom. Friends change." Her tone was calm, but her eyes looked distant. I reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, and she smiled weakly. That was the first time I felt it, the quiet wall starting to rise between us. Still, life went on. I cooked her favorite meals. She left me little notes when she went out with friends. Sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, she'd hug me from behind and whisper, "You're the best, Mom." And just like that, the wall would vanish for a while. Her father passed away when she was 16. That was the hardest year of our lives. He had been sick for a while, but we always believed he'd recover. The day he didn't, everything changed. Lila didn't cry much at the funeral. She stood next to me, holding my hand so tightly that I could feel her nails digging into my skin. That night, she went into her room and didn't come out for hours. I sat outside her door listening. No sound, no sobs, just silence. When she finally opened it, her face was pale but calm. She looked at me and said, "I'm going to take care of you now, Mom." It broke my heart and warmed it at the same time. I wanted to tell her she didn't need to, that I'd take care of her no matter what. But I just hugged her instead. Sometimes words only get in the way. For the next few years we lived quietly. We had our routines, breakfast together, movie nights on Sundays, long walks in the evenings. She got a small job at a local bookstore after school. She loved books. She said they made her feel safe, as if each story was a home she could walk into whenever the real world felt too heavy. I remember she used to bring home second-hand novels and say, "They smell like someone else's memories." She'd read them aloud to me sometimes, and I'd just watch her face light up as the words came alive. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. When she finished high school, she got accepted into a college in the city. It was a big moment for her, but I could tell she was nervous about leaving home. She hugged me tight before her first day and said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll visit every weekend." And for a while she did. Those weekends were the highlight of my week. I'd cook her favorite dishes, lentil soup, buttered rice, and her father's old recipe for spicy potatoes. She'd tell me about her classes, her friends, her professors. She sounded happy. But after the first year, her visits became less frequent. At first she said she was busy with exams, then group projects, then part-time work. Each reason made sense. Each reason sounded right. But together they built a distance that felt wrong. When she did visit, she was quieter. She'd spend more time on her phone, less time at the table. Her laughter, the one that used to fill every corner of our home, became rare. One night, while she was home for the holidays, I walked into her room to find her packing. I asked, "Going somewhere?" She smiled faintly and said, "Just heading back early. My friends are planning a trip." I tried to sound cheerful when I said, "That's nice. Where to?" But inside I was hoping she'd say, "I'll stay a few more days." She didn't. She left early the next morning, giving me a quick hug that felt more like a goodbye than a see you soon. That was the first time I felt truly alone. Not because the house was empty, but because I realized her world no longer included me the way it used to. Over the next few years she finished college, found a job in the city, and moved into her own apartment. She called me sometimes, short calls, quick check-ins. "Hi, Mom. How are you?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. And you?" "I'm okay. Just busy. Always busy." I wanted to ask her if she was eating well, if she still read before bed, if she still thought about her father. But she always sounded rushed, distracted. So I kept my questions to myself. Sometimes she'd visit for holidays. I'd clean the house from top to bottom, cook her favorites, and wait by the window for her to arrive. When she did, I'd hug her a little longer than she liked, as if I could store up enough warmth to last me until the next visit. She'd smile politely, say, "I'm tired, Mom. Maybe we'll talk later." And she'd disappear into her room. I began to notice little changes. She started dressing differently, talking differently, thinking differently. None of it was wrong, it was just different. And with every small change, I felt like I was losing another piece of the girl I once knew. I didn't realize it then, but the night she left, the night she walked away, had been coming for a long time. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow fading, like the sunset you watch without noticing how dark it's gotten until it's night. But even in those fading years, she'd still do little things that reminded me she cared. A birthday card, a surprise visit, a message saying, "I miss you, Mom." Those small moments were my oxygen. Sometimes I'd replay her old voice messages just to hear her laugh. It reminded me that underneath the distance, there was still love. And I held on to that, the hope that maybe one day, when the noise of the world around her quieted, she'd hear the sound of home again. Because that's what mothers do. We wait, we remember, and we love even in the silence. I think every mother knows when something is slipping away. You can feel it before you can name it, like the change in the air before rain. It starts quietly, almost kindly. A missed call, a late reply, a voice that sounds tired even when it says everything is fine. That's how it began with Lila. After she moved into her apartment, she became harder to reach. She still called, but the calls were shorter, and her voice was different, polite, distant, like she was speaking to someone who didn't quite belong in her new life. Sometimes she'd tell me she was out with friends or working late, and I'd pretend I wasn't disappointed. I'd smile at the phone and say, "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." And I truly was. But inside there was an ache that kept growing. A quiet fear that she didn't need me anymore. One evening I called her just to ask how she was doing. She answered, but the sound of laughter and chatter came through the line. "Mom, can I call you later?" "We're at dinner," she said quickly. I heard someone in the background say her name and she laughed. That same laugh I'd once known so well. But it wasn't for me anymore. Before I could reply, she hung up. I sat there holding the phone to my ear long after the line went silent. It's strange how heavy a small object can feel when your heart is inside it. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked around her old room, tracing my fingers over the pictures on her wall. School awards, family photos, drawings she'd made as a child. Each one told a story that felt like it belonged to another lifetime. When I looked at those photos, I saw a girl who used to believe home was the safest place in the world. And now I wasn't sure she believed that anymore. Weeks passed, then months. She called less and less. I started telling myself she was just busy, that young people have their own lives, that it's normal to drift apart. But my heart didn't listen to reason. It just waited. One day out of nowhere she called. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Mom, can I come over this weekend?" I nearly dropped the phone. "Of course, sweetheart. You don't even have to ask." I spent the next 2 days preparing everything. Cleaned the house, changed the sheets in her room, cooked her favorite dishes. It felt like sunshine had returned after a long winter. When she arrived, I noticed something immediately. She looked older. Not by years, but by worry. Her eyes had lost that easy sparkle. Still, I didn't ask questions. I just hugged her and said, "It's good to have you home." She smiled politely and said, "It's just for a day or two, Mom. I have to be back by Sunday." That evening we sat together at dinner. I talked about small things, the neighbors, the garden, the cat that had started visiting our porch. She nodded, smiled faintly, and stared at her phone between bites. At one point I asked gently, "Everything okay at work?" She looked up, startled. "Yeah, just a lot going on." Then she looked back down. I wanted to reach across the table, take her hand, and tell her she didn't have to hide anything from me. But something in her eyes told me she wasn't ready to talk. So I stayed quiet. After dinner, she went to her room. I stood outside her door for a while, listening to the faint sound of her phone buzzing. Part of me wanted to knock, but I didn't. I just whispered through the door, "Good night, sweetheart," and went to bed. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The house felt full again, yet lonelier than ever. Because she was here, but she wasn't really here. The next morning I made pancakes the way she used to love when she was little. When she came into the kitchen, she smiled faintly. Pancakes? You still make them the same way. Of course, I said. Some things never change. She didn't answer. She just sat down quietly. Halfway through breakfast, her phone rang. She looked at the screen and frowned slightly before answering. Her tone changed, softer, warmer, the way she used to talk to me. I listened quietly as she said, "Yes, I'll be there. I promise." Then she hung up, stood up and said, "Mom, I have to go out for a bit." I didn't ask where. I just nodded. "Be safe." She left, and I stood by the window watching her walk down the street. She looked confident, independent. Everything a mother dreams her daughter will become. But my heart whispered she's walking farther away each time. That evening she came back late. Her tone was distant again, polite but tired. I asked if she wanted tea, but she said she'd just go to bed. The next morning she was gone. She left a note on the table. Had to leave early. Love you, Mom. 3 lines. That was all. I sat down and read that note over and over. Her handwriting looked hurried, almost unsure. Like someone writing with one hand while holding their heart with the other. Something inside me shifted that day. I realized she wasn't just busy. She was leaving. Slowly, quietly, but surely. I tried to reach out more after that. I'd send her little messages. Thinking of you. Hope you're eating well. Miss you. Sometimes she replied with a heart emoji or a quick, love you too. But sometimes there was nothing. Once I called her and she didn't answer. Hours later she texted, "Sorry, Mom. Was out with friends." I wanted to reply. I just wanted to hear your voice. But I didn't. I didn't want to sound needy. So I just wrote, "That's okay, sweetheart. Have fun." And then I sat there staring at my phone screen, wondering when motherhood had turned into silence. Over time I began to feel invisible. Like the walls of her past that she didn't need anymore. She'd post pictures online, smiling with friends at parties at new places, and I'd look at them quietly, telling myself I should be happy she was happy. But some nights when I saw her smile in those photos, it hurt, because I realized I didn't know that version of her anymore. Then one evening she called unexpectedly. Her voice was trembling slightly. "Mom, I need to tell you something." My heart raced. "What is it, darling?" "I think I'm moving. Farther away. I got a new job." I forced myself to sound proud. "That's wonderful, Lila." "Yeah," she said softly. "It's a big step." We talked for a few more minutes, mostly about practical things, rent, packing, paperwork. But behind her words I heard hesitation, maybe guilt. Before hanging up she said quietly, "Don't be sad, okay? This is good for me." I smiled through the ache. "I know, sweetheart. I just want you to be happy." After that call I sat in the dark for a long time. The sound of her voice lingered in my head, calm, distant, careful. And I realized something that took me years to admit. She wasn't running away from me. She was running toward the person she needed to become. But that truth didn't make it hurt any less. Days turned into weeks again. We spoke less and less. Sometimes I'd hear from her once a month, just enough to remind me she was still out there somewhere. Then one day she came home again without warning. It was late evening, and I was watering the plants in the front yard. When I saw her standing there, suitcase beside her, I froze. "Lila." She smiled weakly. "Hi, Mom." My hands were trembling as I took the suitcase from her. "You didn't tell me you were coming." "I needed some time," she said quietly. "Just a few days to think." That night we sat in the living room again, surrounded by the hum of silence. She looked around the house as if seeing it for the first time. Then she whispered, "Everything looks smaller." I smiled sadly. "Maybe you just grew." She didn't respond. After a long pause, she said, "Mom, have you ever felt like you're not where you're meant to be?" Her voice was soft but serious. I looked at her and said, "Yes, many times." She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "That's how I feel lately." I wanted to tell her that she was where she was meant to be. That home would always be her place. But I could see in her eyes that she was searching for something bigger. Something I couldn't give her. So instead I said, "Then go find it, sweetheart. Just don't forget where you started." She smiled faintly. "I won't." But I think we both knew she already had. That night, after she went to bed, I stood outside her door like I used to when she was a child. I listened to her soft breathing and I prayed. Not for her to stay, but for her to find peace. Because sometimes loving someone means letting them walk away, even when it breaks you. And deep down I think I already knew that soon she would. It was a Thursday night. I remember because the rain had started just after sunset, soft and steady, tapping against the windows like an old friend who didn't want to come inside. The house smelled of wet earth and lemon polish. I had just finished cleaning the kitchen when I heard her door open upstairs. For days, Lila had been quieter than usual. She moved around the house like a ghost, polite, calm, distant. She helped with dinner, smiled when I asked questions, but there was something behind her eyes that never met mine fully. I could sense something building, a storm she didn't want to speak of. That night, as the rain fell harder, she came into the living room. She stood by the window watching the dark sky flicker with distant lightning. Her reflection looked pale, uncertain, like someone standing on the edge of a decision. "Mom," she said softly. I looked up from my sewing. "Yes, sweetheart." She hesitated. "Do you ever feel like you've stayed too long in one place?" Her voice was steady, but her hands were trembling. I set down the needle and sighed. "Maybe. But sometimes staying is what keeps things whole." She turned toward me, eyes glistening. "And what if staying makes you feel like you're disappearing?" The question caught me off guard. I stared at her, my daughter, the little girl who used to run barefoot through the garden, now standing there, asking questions that sounded like confessions. "What's going on, Lila?" I asked gently. She looked down, took a deep breath and said, "I've been offered a position abroad. It's in another country. I already accepted it." For a moment, I didn't understand the words. They hung in the air between us like fragile glass, shimmering, dangerous. "Abroad," I repeated quietly. She nodded. "Yes. It's a great opportunity, Mom. Something I've wanted for a long time." I swallowed hard. "When were you going to tell me?" She hesitated. "I was waiting for the right time. I didn't want to upset you." I forced a smile, though my heart was already breaking. "When do you leave?" She looked away. "Tomorrow morning." The room went silent. I could hear the clock ticking, the rain against the glass, the sound of my own breathing getting shallow. "Tomorrow," I whispered. "That soon?" She nodded, tears finally spilling over. "I didn't know how to tell you. I thought if I said it out loud I'd lose my nerve." I stood up, feeling the floor tilt beneath me. For a moment I wanted to be angry, to tell her how unfair it was, how selfish, how cruel. But when I looked at her trembling hands and tearful eyes, all I felt was love. Painful, helpless, consuming love. "Come here," I said softly. She hesitated, then walked into my arms. I held her close, closer than I had in years, and for a few seconds it felt like time folded back on itself. I could smell her hair, still faintly like lavender. I could feel the rapid beat of her heart against mine. And I thought, this is the last time I'll hold her like this. "I'm sorry," she whispered against my shoulder. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I stroked her hair and said, "You didn't hurt me, sweetheart. You just grew up." We stood there for a long while saying nothing. The rain outside softened to a hush. Felt like even the night was listening. Later, when she went upstairs to pack, I sat on the couch staring at the empty hallway. I could hear drawers opening, the soft thud of her suitcase being filled, the occasional rustle of clothes. Every sound felt like a goodbye. I wanted to go up there to help her, to fold her shirts the way I used to tuck little notes into her bag like I did when she went on school trips. But I knew this wasn't a trip. This was departure. And some journeys a mother can't follow. So instead I brewed 2 cups of tea and waited. When she finally came down, her suitcase rolled softly across the floor. She looked tired but calm, like someone who'd made peace with her choice. "I made tea," I said quietly. "Chamomile. Your favorite." She smiled weakly. "You still remember." I smiled back. "I remember everything." We sat together, sipping in silence. The clock struck 10. She was leaving at dawn. At one point she said, "Mom, I know this is hard for you, but I need to do this." I nodded. "I know you do. And I'll be fine." She looked at me like she didn't believe me. And maybe she was right. After she went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I walked into her room and stood at the doorway. Her suitcase was closed, her passport resting on top. She was lying on her side, fast asleep, her face peaceful in the dim light. For a moment, I thought about waking her up just to talk one more time. But I didn't. Instead, I sat on the edge of her bed and whispered, "You were my greatest adventure, Lila. You gave my life meaning. And no matter where you go, you'll always have a home." I kissed her forehead gently, careful not to wake her. Then I slipped out of the room and went downstairs. The rain had stopped, and the first light of dawn was touching the sky. At 5 a.m., I heard her footsteps. She came down, dressed in jeans and a light jacket, her suitcase trailing behind her. Her eyes were swollen, but she smiled bravely. "You're up early," she said softly. "I wanted to see you off," I replied. The taxi pulled up outside, headlights washing the living room wall in pale gold. I followed her to the door. She turned to me, suddenly small again, suddenly my little girl. "Mom," she whispered. "What if I fail?" I reached out, cupped her face in my hands and said, "Then fail with grace. But don't you dare stop trying." She smiled through her tears. "You always know what to say." "I learned it from loving you," I said. She hugged me tight, desperate, trembling. I felt her tears on my neck. And then she pulled away. "I'll call you when I land," she said. I nodded. "I'll be waiting." She walked to the taxi, turned once to wave, and then she was gone. Just like that. I stood on the porch long after the car disappeared down the road. The morning air was cold. The sky was the color of pale smoke. I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and whispered her name to the quiet street. When I finally went back inside, the house felt unbearably empty. Her cup was still on the table, half full of cold tea. A single hairpin lay beside it, glinting in the soft light. It was strange how such small things could carry so much weight. I walked into her room. The bed was neatly made, the closet half empty, and the faint smell of her perfume lingered in the air, soft, floral, haunting. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the open window. Outside, a bird landed on the sill and chirped once before flying away. And I thought, that's her. She's gone to find her sky. The hours that followed were a blur. I cleaned the house just to keep busy. I folded her bedsheets, dusted her bookshelves, even watered her plants. All the small rituals that made me feel close to her. By evening, I sat by the window again, watching the sunset. My phone buzzed. A message. Landed safe. "I love you, Mom." 3 words. Simple, but enough to make my eyes fill with tears. I typed back, "I love you more. Always." Then I set the phone down and let myself cry. Quietly, deeply, like something sacred had just left me. That night I couldn't sleep. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't cruel. It was the kind of silence that comes when life changes shape. I realized then that motherhood isn't about holding on. It's about letting go again and again, and still loving without measure. People talk about heartbreak in terms of romance, but they never mention this kind. The slow, tender ache of a mother watching her child walk into the world without her. And yet, as the moonlight spilled across her empty room, I smiled through the tears. Because deep down I knew she hadn't really left me. Not entirely. Every heartbeat of hers carried mine within it. Every step she took had my prayers beneath it. And someday, whether in a phone call, a letter, or a memory, she would find her way back. Not to this house, maybe, but to me. Until then, I'd keep her room ready. Just in case she ever needed to come home. Years passed. Too many to count without feeling them pressing on my chest. The days, the months, the birthdays, the holidays, they came and went, each one quieter than the last. I kept her room just as it had been the night she left, the bed neatly made, the little silver bracelet on the nightstand, her favorite mug on the kitchen shelf. I told myself it was for her in case she came back. But really it was for me. A place in the house that still felt like her presence, still smelled faintly of her. I didn't expect her to return suddenly or on a schedule. I didn't even know if she would ever come back. But I held on to hope, like one holds onto a single candle in a long dark tunnel. And that candle kept me warm during the coldest nights. It was a late afternoon when I saw her car pull into the driveway. I was in the garden pruning the rose bushes when I heard the engine hum stop. A familiar weight settled in my chest. I looked up and there she was. Lila, my daughter, standing by the car, suitcase in hand, smiling nervously. I froze. For a long moment I couldn't breathe. She looked the same and yet different, older, wiser, carrying the weight of the years she had spent away. I wanted to run to her, throw my arms around her, never let go. But I held myself back, unsure if she would step forward or hesitate. She saw me and her eyes widened slightly. "Mom," she whispered. I dropped the gardening shears, ran to her, and wrapped her in my arms. I could feel her trembling, her tears soaking into my shoulder. "I've missed you," she said between sobs. And all at once I realized I had been holding my breath for years, waiting for this moment. "I've missed you too, my darling," I whispered. We stood there in the driveway, the sun casting long golden streaks across the yard, and we cried together. The years melted away in that embrace. The distance, the misunderstandings, the silent months of longing. All of it dissolved like mist in the morning sun. Finally, she pulled back slightly, holding my face in her hands. "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have called more. I should have, I don't know, been here." I smiled through my tears. "It's okay, sweetheart. You've done what you had to do. You grew, you lived, you learned. And now you're back." Her suitcase lay forgotten at the foot of the porch steps. We went inside together and I made us tea just like we used to. We sat at the kitchen table, the one where we had shared so many meals, so many conversations, and so many quiet moments. The steam rose from our cups, curling into the air like little reminders of the past. For hours we talked. She told me about the countries she had lived in, the friends she had made, the struggles she had faced. She spoke softly, with the kind of honesty that only comes after years of reflection. I listened, absorbing every word, every pause, every sigh. I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct. I just listened, letting her spill the years she had carried inside. At one point she looked at me and said, "Mom, do you forgive me?" I reached across the table, took her hand in mine and said, "Forgive you? Sweetheart, I never stopped loving you. There's nothing to forgive." She smiled, the kind of real deep smile that reaches the eyes and the heart. And for the first time in years I felt like my home was whole again. Later that evening we went upstairs to her room. Everything was just as she had left it. The little silver bracelet, her favorite books, the notes she had once left on the nightstand. She ran her fingers over the surfaces, gently touching memories that belonged to both of us. "I can't believe I left this behind," she whispered. "It was waiting for you," I said. "I kept it here for you." She hugged me again tightly, as if trying to compress the years into one single moment. "I've missed this," she said softly. "I've missed you," I replied. Over the next few days we fell into a rhythm again. Slowly, gently. We cooked together. We laughed at old jokes. We shared stories that felt new, even though they had been living in our hearts for years. One morning, as we were having breakfast, she looked at me and said, "Mom, I never realized how much I needed this. How much I needed you." I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And I needed you too, every single day." She paused, thinking, and then added, "I was scared. I wanted to be independent, to prove I could manage on my own. But I didn't realize that leaving didn't make me independent. It just made me miss home." I nodded, tears brimming in my eyes. "It's okay, sweetheart. You had to learn on your own. That's part of life. But home is always waiting for you." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. And I realized then that the years of distance, of waiting, of quiet longing, had not broken us. They had only made our bond stronger. That evening we sat by the window looking at the stars. I told her stories about her childhood. The little mischiefs, the big dreams, the laughter that had once filled every corner of the house. She laughed softly at first, then more freely, like she was letting a part of herself that had been hidden come back to life. I thought about all the nights I had spent waiting for her calls, all the cups of tea I had made for a daughter who wasn't there, all the quiet prayers I had whispered into the darkness. And now here she was, alive and present, bringing with her a warmth that only a child returning home can bring. Days turned into weeks and we settled into a new normal. A life where distance had taught us patience, where absence had taught us appreciation, and where love had proven stronger than time or space. One evening as we sat together she said, "Mom, I don't think I ever truly understood your love, until I had to live without it." I smiled gently. "That's the thing about love, sweetheart. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it waits. But it never leaves. She hugged me again, and I felt the years of longing, of heartache, of silent nights dissolve in that embrace. And I understood being a mother isn't just about holding on. It's about letting go when they need to fly. And it's about welcoming them back when they finally return. That night I went to bed with her still awake beside me, talking softly about her dreams, her hopes, her fears. And I realized something profound. Life is fragile, but love, real love, endures. It survives distance, mistakes, misunderstandings, and even time itself. It waits patiently in the quiet corners of our hearts, ready to bloom again. In the weeks that followed, she shared more of her life with me. The choices she had made, the lessons she had learned. And I shared my own stories, the little things I had noticed while she was away. The garden growing wild, the cat that refused to leave my side, the mornings that felt colder without her laughter. We laughed. We cried. We healed. And one evening, as we sat together on the porch watching the sunset, she said, "Mom, I think I finally understand. Home isn't a place. It's a feeling. And that feeling is you." I smiled, tears sliding down my cheeks. Yes, my darling. Home is where love waits. And love is what we always had, and always will have. That night, for the first time in years, I went to bed feeling complete. Not because my daughter had returned, but because I knew that love, patient and enduring, had guided her back. Life would continue to change. She would grow older, I would grow older. But the bond we shared, the quiet, enduring love of a mother and daughter, would remain. And I understood, finally, that sometimes letting go isn't losing. It's simply giving the people we love the room to find themselves, so they can come back whole and ready, to the arms that have always been waiting.